course you can call me Daddy, and if you want to follow me on Facebook, you can find me at james.desborough, Postmortem Studios, all one word, JD Writer and JGD Games. Disclaimer: I'm not passing judgment on anybody for their own personal foibles, nor suggesting a return wholesale to the good old days. I'm just taking note of something weird. Disclaimer. That said, the whole 50s fetish thing we're about to discuss is kinda hot. The 1950s was a very tied down, buttoned up era, and not for the fun reasons. Wasp culture was dominant in America, and everywhere else was still recovering from the war, and in the UK we were still on the ration. Repressive overculture tends to breed interesting countercultures and subcultures. In a similar way, the Victorian era, which everyone remembers for being stiff upper lips and lie back and think of England and all of that sort of thing, had a huge whoring culture just beneath the surface, and a great deal of kink bubbling away just beneath that surface of stiff upper lips and sacrifice for the empire. In the same way, the 1950s, albeit out of sight, was rife with an underbelly of kink, as chronicled in the dubious pages of Bizarre magazine. The 1950s idyll was what many still associate with normal family life, even though it hasn't been for some time. Dad goes to work, earns enough to support his wife, 2.4 children, a dog, and a prodigious smoking habit. Mum stays home, keeps house, raises the kids, all in a beautiful suburban home behind a white picket fence. If Dad's dinner isn't up to snuff, he gets to put Mum across his knee and spank her. Okay, so sometimes the 50s kink was saying the quiet part loud there, but even so, it was a fairly buttoned up, tied down, what will the neighbours think sort of era. But that used to be the norm, the classic nuclear family, or at least the expectation, the aspirational norm. Now, it hasn't been for some time, probably since the late 60s, certainly since the 1980s. But not being the norm and becoming a fetish are two different things. Two very different things. And what was once normalcy, what was once the societal standard, is now very much a fetish. So how does such a thing come about? I don't really know, but I have some theories. Feminism has addressed a lot of the problems that women used to suffer, and has expanded their choices in the world and in life to near total equality in the weird nations. They're hampered only really still by certain inescapable biological realities. Feminism, other than what's called derisively choice feminism, has however never really found a way to reconcile the fact that for some women a traditional lifestyle is what they want. Those women who do want a traditional life, whether as an individual choice or as part of the whole trad wife movement or something else larger like religion or politics, they're often shamed for that choice, repress those views and desires, don't express them to anybody, and there is nothing like shame or repression for creating kinks. While that's been going on for women, masculinity has not been redefined or widened or opened up in the same kind of way. Instead, it's been undermined. It's an imperfect analogy, but you can compare typical male psychology to honour culture in societies, and female psychology to dignity culture in societies. In this instance, the male brain, we should call it, you can argue whether it's a construct or not in the comments, is one of respect. Men want respect, they want to feel useful, to be of repute, to provide. That can be hard to come by as society has swung into a position of often denigrating men, mocking them, devaluing them, and as a society has shifted to a more feminized workplace and a more feminized societal structure, where webs of contacts, whisper networks and so on are very much the real seat of power, and authority and hierarchy less so, which is a good thing as far as I'm concerned, but let's not pretend that there aren't some drawbacks to this as well. It's not one of equal worth so much as a role reversal of what people tell themselves the past was like. There is no understanding whatsoever given to the desires of traditionalist men in society, even less than is given to traditionalist women. Even more shame and ridicule is piled on, again a recipe for fetishization. To be a masculine man or a feminine woman is to be subjected to shame. Again, that takes us into the land of fetishization. That would be a horrible branch on the faraway tree, but the pursuit of hypermasculine or hyperfeminine appearance, even in queer relationships, seems to be ripe for fetishization and shame. This seems to have kicked into high gear over more recent years, leading to an influx of normies into the fetish and kink spaces. Men wanting to be just a little bit more dominant in a conventional heterosexual relationship. Women wanting to be a little bit more submissive in what is otherwise a fairly normal heterosexual relationship. People who've read and liked 50 Shades, unfortunately, looking for just a little bit of slap with their tickle, a little bit of spice. But nothing compared to the level of kink that the community understands itself to have and to express. To them, this seems like an unwelcome intrusion of cisgender, heterosexual, rather vanilla people into the kink space. But to think that is, I think, to fail to recognise just how fetishized the old norms have become, just how fringe, just how much society has shifted. It demonstrates, for me, I think, that we're in the middle of what is actually a wildly socially and sexually conservative era. It's just that social and sexual conservatism doesn't look like it used to. Doesn't look like we imagine it would or remember it did. The new norms are the old exotic, and the old norms are the new exotic. And that's weird, especially when it's happened so fast. We're supposedly a society now that values people's individuality and allows them to express their individuality, and who don't judge or shame, particularly kink shame. But this seems to be a very, very notable exception. Zang. Rob Necronomicon's art has graced several Postmortem Studios products, and Rob has also produced some stock art pieces you can use in your own projects or at your gaming table. Rob's stark, dark graphical style is perfect for horror, old school fantasy, and dark future projects. You can buy Rob's art from Postmortem Studios at DrivethruRPG or at post-mort.com.